Most people with chronic pain believe that the reason they're still in pain is because something is still physically damaged. And this makes sense, right? Your pain feels physical, so why not be coming from a physical source? But what if I told you that your nervous system has just learned to turn up the volume on your pain? Just like you can train a muscle to lift heavier weights or run further distances, your nervous system has been trained to experience more pain. And this isn't your fault by any means, but it is a learned behavior that we have to unlearn. When you experience chronic stress, anxiety, fear, and catastrophizing thoughts around your pain, your nervous system starts responding by increasing the excitatory neurotransmitter glutamate, which is sending more danger signals, more pain signals to your brain. But at the same time, your brain decreases the amount of descending inhibition, which keeps all of these excitatory neurotransmitters in check, preventing them from getting to the brain and creating pain out of things that normally shouldn't create pain. This, of course, is another example of how pain centralization, or the gate control theory of pain, occurs in chronic pain sufferers. Now, I think it's really important to understand how this mechanism works because that just gets us one step closer to figuring out how to treat it. Now, your nerves are not just one long wire running from your toes all the way to your brain. They're separate individual ones all connected together, kind of like how the wires in your walls are all connected with wire nuts. So when the first nerve fires, it's sending its signal to the next nerve, which then has to pick it up and send it to the next one and eventually getting to your brain. Now, when this first nerve fires, it looks something like this. It increases and then decreases, but it only passes that signal to the next nerve if it crosses this threshold. But here's the thing, nerves only fire at one intensity. So if it only fires once, you're only going to get this intensity and not cross that threshold. The nerve doesn't get to decide to fire stronger, it can only fire more often. So this first nerve actually needs to fire a few times in succession in order to cross this threshold. So when the nerve fires the first time, it looks like this, but if that second impulse happens quickly enough, it doesn't go all the way back down, it comes back up, and then it fires a third time, and now it's strong enough to cross that threshold to send the signal to the next nerve up to the brain. In neurophysiology, this is called temporal summation, which just goes to show in chronic pain, you don't need a big, strong trigger such as physical tissue damage. All you need is repetition that adds up over time. And this is exactly what chronic stress, anxiety, fear, catastrophizing thoughts about your chronic pain truly are. It's not just a single thought that you have, it's constant thoughts that build on each other and eventually break down this descending inhibition, creating more central sensitization, contributing to your chronic pain. If you're living with chronic pain, you have to understand that stress is not just something that happens to your mind. It's not just an inconvenience. It is changing how your body regulates inflammation, which is a major factor contributing to your chronic pain. When your brain detects a threat, whether it's physical danger or things like fear, anxiety, chronic stress, catastrophizing thoughts around your chronic pain, it doesn't matter. Your brain can't tell the difference. What it does is it activates your hypothalamus, which is like the control center in your brain, converting nervous system inputs into hormonal outputs. So your hypothalamus says, yeah, we need some more cortisol because we need to make some quick energy to either fight or flee from this threat, whether it's physical or emotional. Again, it doesn't matter. So the hypothalamus tells the pituitary gland, hey, we need more cortisol. Pituitary gland tells the adrenal gland sitting on top of your kidney, we need more cortisol. Your adrenal gland creates more cortisol. In short bouts, this is fine. This is protecting you. But things like chronic stress, anxiety, fear, catastrophizing thoughts around your chronic pain, those aren't single bouts. These are things that are happening multiple times a day, every day, most likely. So therefore, we are just constantly increasing the amount of cortisol flowing through our system. Under normal circumstances, this all creates acute inflammation, but we're not under normal circumstances here. All this increase in cortisol and we're not using it now creates chronic inflammation, especially by activating the nuclear factor kappa beta pathway, which we've talked about in a lot of previous videos. This is what is the main driver behind the chronic inflammation, which is contributing to all chronic pain conditions. There's something that chronic pain sufferers aren't being told, and it's that when things like stress, fear, anxiety, catastrophizing thoughts around your pain become chronic, now they actually start to activate your immune system the same way that a bacteria or a virus would. And it's acting as if it were under attack all the time, even though it's not. Inside of your brain and spinal cord are specialized immune cells called microglia, and they're activated by the stress hormones and neurotransmitters that we talked about in the last two videos. What you may not have understood up until now is that your immune system actually creates inflammation, and that's why we talk about immune function so much with chronic pain. So these microglia release cytokines that create interleukin 1 beta, tumor necrosis factor alpha. These are just different forms of inflammation. They're used to recruit more immune cells, neutralize the threats, help heal damaged tissues. But if there's no threat to neutralize because this is being activated by stress, anxiety, fear, catastrophizing thoughts around your chronic pain, it all builds up and now binds to individual neurons, which increase their excitability, especially through the NMDA receptor, which we've talked about in a lot of past videos. So I hope you're understanding by now that emotions don't just stick to your mind, they affect your entire body, which is why things like mind-body counseling need to be incorporated from day one and not just treated as an adjunct therapy for this secondary symptom that's occurring because of your chronic pain. This is a bidirectional relationship. So chronic pain causes these emotions. These emotions create more chronic pain. Chronic pain sufferers are not told enough just how much their emotions really affect their pain, because things like stress, anxiety, fear, catastrophizing thoughts around your chronic pain don't just activate your brain, it actually reorganizes it to keep you in a perpetual state of chronic pain. When you're being bombarded with emotions all day long, whether from your pain or from something else, your amygdala, which is the threat detection center of your brain, starts to become more active. And at the same time, your prefrontal cortex, which is a major part of your brain responsible for pain processing and suppression, starts to become a little bit more inactive. None of the important stuff. The inflammation that your emotions are creating, see the last video, are interfering with neuroplasticity. You see, the neurons in your brain aren't just connected from one to the next to the next. They're actually all interconnected through this big spider web going throughout your entire brain. But that chronic neuroinflammation from your emotions breaks these connections and reorganizes them in a way that's detrimental to you. There are 44 different regions of the brain associated with pain. So when you have an underperforming prefrontal cortex, these other areas should be able to pick up the slack and keep pain suppressed. But because we broke all of these connections, now the prefrontal cortex is underperforming, creating more pain, all because of the inflammation caused by your emotions. Chronic pain. It's not just something your body feels, it's something that your brain predicts. And when you add on things like anxiety, fear, and catastrophizing thoughts around your chronic pain, your brain starts to create predictive models. Here's what most people are never told. There are 44 different regions of your brain associated with pain. And your brain can create pain well before any movements occur. Because if we can predict pain, surely we can avoid it, right? Unfortunately, that's not how it works. Now, I've never met a chronic pain sufferer who wasn't fearful of their pain. And if you think this doesn't apply to you, classic example is you're sitting in a chair and one time you stood up and it caused a whole lot of pain. The next time you are sitting down and go to sit up, you are going to brace yourself, whether that is physically or mentally, for pain. Let's be honest, standing from a seated position is most likely not causing any physical damage. That's a normal human behavior. But what it is doing, that fear of pain is now creating avoidance, which then reinforces the fear as being correct. So this is why avoidance doesn't fix pain. The prediction is what is creating pain, and we're just reinforcing the prediction as being right. All you chronic pain sufferers out there, casual reminder about your autonomic nervous system. Remember, it's that branch of your nervous system under involuntary control. So it just does its job. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to do anything. That's great, but it's largely controlled by your emotions. So you can either be in a sympathetic state, which is your fight or flight, or a parasympathetic state. That's your rest and digest. Ultimately, what they mean is you're either in a state of survival or healing, and you cannot simultaneously be in both. When you're in a constant sympathetic state, not only are you taking resources away from your body's ability to heal, you're activating the periaqueductal gray region of your brain, which is just one of the 44 different regions of your brain associated with pain processing. Specifically, the periaqueductal gray is involved in modulating pain. It's involved in balancing your autonomic nervous system. So now we've actually created this bidirectional relationship where sympathetic activation influences your periaqueductal gray, which then reinforces the sympathetic nervous system, creating more pain, reinforcing fear, and interfering with vocalization. This is actually one of the many reasons why describing chronic pain is so difficult. It's not that you just have a lack of words for it, it's that your brain literally is not allowing you to vocalize how you're experiencing your chronic pain. If you're suffering from chronic pain, the last 6 videos we've been talking about specifically how emotions such as stress, anxiety, and fear contribute to chronic pain. Because it doesn't matter if these emotions are stemming from your pain or from somewhere else. It doesn't matter if these started first or your pain started first. You now have a bidirectional relationship between these two. They are interconnected and you cannot separate one without the other. Now, if you are one of the lucky few who does get prescribed some kind of talk therapy or counseling for your chronic pain, it still might not be enough because that counseling could largely just be focused on the stress, the anxiety, and the fear. But it's not making the connection between the emotions and the pain. And that's the most important part. What you really need to be pushing for is a referral to some sort of pain reprocessing therapy. This is a specific psychological treatment that not only helps you to make the connection between your emotions and your physical body, but to help break that connection as well. Right now, every input into your brain is being interpreted as life-threatening, and that's why your brain is responding with this intense chronic pain all the time. The pain reprocessing therapy is retraining your brain to understand that all these inputs are actually non-life threatening and are actually very helpful. Helpful because remember, pain is not the problem. Pain is just the signal to your brain that something is wrong. So now we need to listen to that signal to actually figure out what is wrong.